Hello fellow wand lovers. The Techter expansion is finally out. Today I'm gonna go over all of the changes, and give a small mini guide to all of the tourists picking up the class for the first time. First off, let's go over the changes real quick. I won't yap for too long about them, but if you want to skip ahead, here is the time code. Alright, first off, a lot of wand attacks had their potencies increased. Not only does that put us on par with some other classes in terms of raw damage, it also fixes many issues in our damage kit. If you watched any of my gameplay videos, you might have noticed that I generally avoid using the 4th normal attack. It simply wasn't optimal to use, but now I can't get enough of it. You might also remember me complaining about wand lovers. Previously that skill turned DPS negative normal attacks into DPS neutral attacks, which is quite frankly useless. But now, it buffs normal attacks like crazy. Some attacks receive upwards of 100 potency, which is insane. All the gap closing attacks have been altered, so that they won't come too close to the enemy, and several attacks had their accuracy, range, and speed improved. Wand parry counter saw the biggest improvement in that regard. More potency has been allocated to the shockwave, and photonic fury is now caused by the shockwave instead of the melee swing. This fixed the issue where if the shockwave is the only part that manages to hit the enemy, you miss out on less damage than before. Almost every attack had its sidestep, and weapon action cancel timings improved. We can now use uncharged techniques to go into our skip beat attack. Honestly, Techter feels like a really well-oiled machine now. To top it all off, we got a few cooldown adjustments. Overemphasis had its cooldown halved, which is crazy. Techter's support has been vastly improved in general, but more on that later. The perhaps most important cooldown reduction happened to Shifta/Debin. The cooldown at the beginning of a quest is now only 10 seconds. I can't tell you how frustrating it was farming dual quests, and then you get your Photon Blast, or Elemental down before Shifta even becomes available. But now, that won't be an issue anymore. I would have preferred if the cooldown was gone entirely, but 10 seconds is alright. Some bosses have a 15-second animation at the start of the quest anyway, so the cooldown virtually doesn't exist in those encounters. There is one thing I want to mention that wasn't on the patch notes. The values for physical down accumulation have been increased across the board. So, not only is Techter dealing better damage now, it also is better at stunning the enemy. Talus didn't get any improvements this patch, but we already knew this would happen. Talus is going to get improved in December, together with Force. And that's the gist of the changes. Now, let's talk about the new skills. Usually an expansion gives only one skill, but Techter actually got two. Wand quick element change allows us to use uncharged techniques in order to change our wand element. Coupled with the changes to skip beat, it speeds up our gameplay tremendously. It also opens up a lot of new interactions with techniques that weren't possible before. For example, you can actually build Megid spheres now. Thanks to the buff to the 4th normal attack, using techniques with skip beat is DPS neutral. So all that yapping I did a couple of months ago was actually addressed. In fact, most issues I talked about have been addressed. It was incredibly euphoric to read these patch notes, and try things out in the game once maintenance was over. The next skill on the list is Techter Extra Field. This skill right here is the result of all of us complaining about Techter's support capabilities lacking in comparison. Not only to Ranger, but also to Techter in PSO2 Classic. Back when I made my first video on a potential Techter renewal, I asked for Zanverse to return and be triggered by Element Pursuit. It's not quite what we got, but it's very close. Techter Extra Field has two parts. First, when we activate Element Pursuit, we cause a new support field. This one charges the Photon Blast gauge of everyone inside by 2%. Depending on how fast you can use Pursuit, that's between 8 to 10% Photon Blast buildup per minute. The second half of this skill is basically Zanverse-like. When activating a wand or Talus Photon Blast, you cause a new support field. Everyone inside that field receives 10 follow-up attacks that they can use for the next 45 seconds. In case there are multiple Techters using Photon Blast at the same time, the follow-up attacks stack up to an upper limit of 100. You probably noticed that neither of these effects has diminishing returns for having multiple Techters on the field. Which is another big issue with Techter that they addressed with this expansion. Alright, now that we have all of that out of the way. How exactly is Techter supposed to be played? Don't worry, I'll keep this brief. I'll make a comprehensive guide when all tech arts customizations are out. Here is my skill tree for using the Bouncer subclass. Some fights prefer a different subclass, but Bouncer is a very comfy general purpose choice. First off, cast a technique to apply an element onto your wand, and activate Shift a Deban in order to buff your party. Keep an eye out on this icon on your party list. If it's missing, use Shift a Deban again. When people mount Mars, the buff unfortunately disappears. It can be a little bit annoying, but nothing we can't deal with. Matching elements on your wand isn't terribly important. You can totally use the ice element in Resoul Forest, for example. Most enemies will be either weak to fire, dark, or ice, but the ice-weak mobs are the annoying ones. However, when facing boss enemies, I strongly recommend focusing on their elemental weakness. If you're applying an element mid-combat, make sure to press normal attack after casting the technique to perform a skip-beat combo. Now that you have an element on your wand, it's time to fill this gauge as quickly as possible. To do this, you use wand photon arts, 3rd and 4th normal attack, and counters. A lot of wand attacks have frontal guard frames, and if you block an attack that way, you cause a little bit of extra damage, but it's generally preferable to cancel attacks into your counters. If you want a hyper-optimized rotation, here you go. Now the gauge is full, what do we do with it? If you hold your weapon action button, you unleash a powerful elemental attack, while discharging your wand from its element. And we're back to square one, you reapply your element, use wand attacks to build the gauge, and then discharge. Rinse and repeat. It's very simple. If you need extra juice, Wand Lovers is here to temporarily strengthen your wand normal attacks. Techter also has access to compound techniques which slowly build over time. They are mini nukes, and when they're used they apply corresponding elemental blocks. Right now these techniques are a little bit weak, but I'm adamant they'll be buffed in December. The blots are a mechanic that Force and Bouncer interact with more. On Techter, half of them can be ignored as of right now. I believe this also will be addressed in December. Our expansion is going to be incomplete until Force gets expanded as well. My weapon palettes look like this. You may be wondering why the weapon action button is missing. Well, I use a specialized controller that has extra buttons I can assign, so I mapped a button dedicated to weapon action. Most of you will likely replace the Photon Blast button with weapon action, and move the Photon Blast over to the sub-palette. Looking at this you might think to yourself that swapping palettes must be annoying, and it kind of is. I think this is where the 4th normal attack comes into play. It's a rather long attack, nearly 2 seconds long. It's usually more than enough time to swap a weapon palette, and if you're popping elemental blots, you're gonna do a skip-beat combo anyway. If you're a keyboard Giga Chad you can just press a corresponding button on your numpad to instantly swap weapon palettes. Assuming of course, you don't use these weird keyboards that cheapen out from having a numpad. But that's about it when it comes to playing Techter. Like I said, it's a very simple class to pick up and play. Obviously there is a lot more nuance when it comes to optimizing Techter gameplay, and I have a feeling Einhander is going to drop some banger videos over on his channel. I do have a couple videos myself, teaching Techter gameplay, but they are a little bit outdated at this point. Links will be in the description regardless. But that's about it. I'm absolutely loving this expansion. If this is an indicator for how good the Force expansion is going to be, then I can't wait. Subscribe if you want to see more Techter content, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Take care!